I'm a big fan of the work. I mean, people like Jeremy and his group at NIST saw this coming for a decade. The need for this, and the fact that we have technical standards that are really ready to go is really a tribute to all of the foresighted work that's been done. It's also been forced a lot by just the needs of the commercial sector. How many of you like upgraded your iPhone lately, and you see that thing where you hold on and your old iPhones show its camera, the new iPhone with all the dots, or vice versa. And I was quite impressed by that, but also wondering, maybe there's some experts in the crowd. Was it using at the same time near field communications to make sure that the devices are actually close to each other and not at the end of some network? Do we have a technical person to know how that, are there techniques to guarantee that when you're transferring your identity from one dongle to another, or one phone to another, that you're actually in possession of both of those? And is it more sophisticated than just showing the camera or something? Anyway, when you get the answer to that, I'd be very interested in hearing it, because I think you can invent things that, or conceptualize things that actually make that happen, where you're rapidly talking back and forth and using the speed of light. If you can rapidly turn around, send out a message with near field communications, encrypt it in real time, nanosecond time level, and send back a digitally stamped version of it with a low enough latency that if you can basically digitally sign a nunce and then get it back to you with a low enough latency, then you have to be, due to the Albert Einstein and the speed of light, you can actually pretty much guarantee that these two devices are close to each other, which makes it pretty hard to makes it more difficult for some hacker out in the middle of nowhere to actually steal your identity. So I think that and the fact that all of those technologies are becoming ready in advance of when we need it, something that's really, really great. Um, so there seem to be, to my mind, what in this Congress in its current configuration, well, a couple of developments. First, from a personal point of view, I think I will be picking fourth for subcommittee ranking memberships on financial services. So that will give me some leverage. There's some chance there's a new subcommittee being set up with French Hill as the chair of the subcommittee, dealing with fintech and crypto. And so this is something that will be, obviously you can't even think about things like crypto regulation until you have a digital identity scheme that, well, first off, is necessary to prevent things like wash trading and all sorts of things. You have to know the true identity. And that the logical necessity of that, I think, is clear to everyone who's been trading assets for forever. Because we had to actually work that out and a decade ago in Dodd-Frank, where there's a trader ID that is biometrically deduped and is necessary if you're going to play on commodity exchanges. And so that for the obvious logic there, you can't prevent things like wash trading and front running unless you can know the true identity behind people that are performing trades. And for that, all that same logic is going to make it necessary if you want to be trading NFTs secure in the knowledge that there is no one manipulating the market by like Melania Trump buying NFTs from herself at some inflated price, which various people have believed has happened. And so if you want to prevent that, you need to have a regulator that can see some cryptographically obscured version of the true identity of people on both sides of that trade. You can, I think, have a much lighter touch regulation having to do with things like stable coins, where you don't have to worry about market manipulation. You just have to worry about, is this being used for illicit purposes? And there's an analogy that I like when people are talking about crypto, because we run in all the time to this statement, well, if it's legal with cash, it should be legal with crypto. Okay, and the reason why that's false is the same reason. If you ask yourself, why is it that every civilized country requires license plates on cars and driver's licenses? So why is that? Because we don't require license plates on donkeys or driver's license, and we don't require them for pedestrians. So what's the difference? And the difference is the speed of escape from the scene of the crime. That is the fun, it would be unacceptable to have cars without license plates cruising around your neighborhood and unlicensed drivers. That would be unthinkable to most civilized people. And it was actually an essential part of the development of the automobile industry to have a licensing regime that gave some assurance that if someone came and ran over your dog, that you could jot down the license plate number, go to a trusted authority, get that de-anonymized and figure out who owns the car, figure out who was driving and haul their ass into court. And that is a necessary condition for automobiles. And because the damage from crypto can be far in excess of what can happen in a single automobile accident, I think that that's the endpoint we're going to have to get. Every crypto wallet will have to have a cryptographically obscured license plate number, and you will be able to de-obscure it when you go to a trusted court and say, here's the proof that a crime has been committed. Here's my laptop locked up with ransomware with a request to transfer Bitcoin into this wallet. You have to be able to go to a judge and say, I want to know who owns that wallet, and then have a requirement that that all digital assets that have been traded will have to have registered the the cryptographically obscured true owner, but on both sides of every transaction upstream. This has the really useful feature that it allows a clean definition, separation between clean money and dirty money. Because if someone offers to pay you something for crypto, and some offers you some crypto asset for payment, you say, okay, that's fine. And then you have your software look on the blockchain to verify that all the way through the prior chain of custody, since this item was created, that there have been licensed participants on every side of all the transactions. So you actually know that that's clean money. Okay, and this is, I think, a logical necessity to have proper regulation of crypto. And so that only works if you have a trusted legal identity behind the whole thing, so that you can say who owns the license plate, and how do I use that license plate number when a crime has been committed to identify them. Actually, about a year ago, we had a hearing in the financial services industry where we hauled in all of the Sam Bankman-Fried and all the crypto luminaries. And that was the question I asked them, is that if you want to prevent crypto from being used for for various nefarious purposes, ransomware, money laundering, human trafficking, whatever your favorite list is. If you want to prevent that, is there any logical alternative to having every crypto transaction associated with a trusted digital identity issued by a country with which we have extradition rights? Okay, and they sort of hemmed and hawed and agreed, because I think that's a logical necessity. And that will be essential to have crypto take off the way automobiles have taken off, because it will, for the same reason it's unacceptable to have registered unlicensed cars and unlicensed drivers. The same thing will be true of crypto. And I think at that point, you will see the crypto flower or not, depending on whether or not the true value of crypto is anonymous transactions or efficiency of making transactions. Anyway, so that's one of the avenues where I see the need for a reliable digital identity taking off. The other one politically is the huge amount of crypto fraud, and sorry, not amount of identity fraud during COVID. I think that is on everyone's radar screen, and both parties are intent on blaming the other party for this, but in fact, it is a bipartisan failure to get our act together on a secure digital identity. Because you can look at other countries that have solved this problem, and they did not have anything like the level of identity fraud in when they had to make emergency payments and emergency benefits for for dealing with COVID. So those are the two avenues. I think legislatively, one of them passes through the Financial Services Committee and would authorize Treasury to do stuff. The other one, which I suspect is going to be a lot more partisan, has to do with government operations. that is just using, well, the obvious solution. We weren't that specific in demanding what it was, but the obvious solution is to use mobile ID or some enhanced version of mobile ID to authenticate yourself for transactions with the government to avoid all this kind of fraud. That's going to be investigated ad nauseum in the, well, at least the finger pointing will take place ad nauseum in the oversight committee, and whether or not they actually come up with the obvious solution, which is that we have to issue trusted, secure digital identities in this country, is an open question. And so I think it's, at some point it's much more comfortable if you have logic on your side when you engage in these arguments. If you only have partisanship, you can go a long ways in Washington, but well, I know you have to be an optimist to take my job at all. So this is, and so I am hopeful that, we came darn close to getting at least the first steps done from the government point of view. I think we got down to a single member of Congress. We got all the way through, then last minute objections by one member of Congress to block what would have been a very useful first step in getting the government to get its act together on accepting secure digital ID. And so I'm hoping that goes through. And so anyway, I'm happy to listen until Jeremy gives me the stage hook here, answer questions, or if anything specifically you're interested in. Sure, yes. You know what you should have up here? You should have one of those parabolic mics, so you just have someone standing up, boom, and then when there's someone having an unauthorized conversation in the back of the room, you embarrass them with that mic.
Believe me, people that know me know that's a bad idea when I'm in the room. You don't want me having access to talk.
Mic, but we can gracefully take the mic away from you by just turning the parabolic.
Okay. All right, well, I will ask my question quickly. You talked about a cryptographically validated digital identity associated with crypto exchanges and other
crypto transactions.
Crypto transactions,
every transaction
right.
on the blockchain is going to have to be signed, or it's going to have cryptographic evidence that
right.
a licensed participant has.
Right. So taking that one step further, have you considered how to bind an actual human being to that identity, and how would you authenticate that in a remote, unsupervised environment?
Yeah, well, it's going to rely on what I think is an essential government function, which is that once in your life, you're going to have to do something maybe even more extreme than what's necessary for the real ID. I think in Illinois, you have to go up and there have to be 2 employees of the state of Illinois present as you get a high resolution picture taken of you. And I think that you're going to have, trusted people take those, take those biometrics and present. It's an essential step in this. And I think that's going to be combined with big data. For some purposes, there will be big data just saying, okay, this guy was registered legally in some little town in Illinois you've never heard of. But it seems that they're now doing billions of dollars of transactions, and let's figure that out. And so there have been technologically, I think, some very interesting work done in the last several years. We actually had a hearing on this in the AI task force having to do with homomorphic encryption. This is the business of querying databases that are encrypted. So you can say, okay, everyone turn over your medical records to a big encrypted database, and then there are ways to ask how many people that that take this, that eat a lot of this food, get cancer or something like that. So you can ask that sort of questions in a statistical sense of the entire database without being able to know exactly who it was that got cancer or all the sensitive information. And that sort of thing can be done also with financial services, looking for patterns of of suspicious behavior. And so I think that ultimately a strong onboarding of individual citizens, including capturing real biometrics. It's like, how many of you have clear in this? Yeah, that's a voting majority. And so it's and that's, you obviously, turn over serious biometrics to them. But that's also combined with the fact that, they know you actually purchased the ticket and all sorts of stuff. So it's pretty hard to sneak onto an airplane, at least through Clear, and as someone who's on the do not fly list. Yeah.
Hi, Gail Hodges, Executive Director of the Open ID Foundation. First, thank you for your thought leadership on the Hill on these important issues on digital identity. It's greatly appreciated. I think many people in the room support your efforts. What can we do to help accelerate the work on the Hill and more generally?
Well, I think that as issues one by one come up, just make sure that there's someone at every hearing that asks the question, how do you do this without, without a secure digital ID? Because it's very common. If you look at all these reports that have come out on central bank digital currencies, everyone's issued reports, and they always dodge the issue of secure digital ID. Even if you believe in a very simple central bank digital currency, an accounts-based system where everyone has an account at the Fed, the very next question you have to answer: how do you authenticate yourself as the owner of that account at the Fed, and especially online? And so that immediately leads you to the necessity of, having on your cell phone a secure digital identity. And so that I think the logic is on our side. And so you have to individually educate members and encourage them to point out the logical necessity every time this comes up of, all this is fine, but it's meaningless if you have identity fraud going on. And I think that is something where more and more members of Congress are, the ones that are willing to talk to me anyway, they kind of get it at this point, and they just want to know, how is this going to work? I think I'm very impressed at the political feasibility of going through the real ID system, because that there's a lot of feel good where people say, well, all these biometrics are being held by my state, and I trust my state, because they can never get hacked. And so you trust your state, and then they don't want to think too hard about what will be necessary to have states compare, the biometric cross checks. So when someone attempts to get a license in New Jersey when they're already operating one under a different name in Illinois, how do you check that? And that's sort of the second step. But the amount of trust in driver's licenses issued by states among the population is pretty high. So using that as a starting point for public trust in getting something that doesn't appear to them to be, too close to a national ID card, which is, yes. Whoops,
Hello.
are you?
Hello there. Hi. I'm Kalia Young. My handle is Identity Woman, and I'm just curious if you're aware that the U.S. federal government is planning on issuing secure digital IDs to a specific population. USCIS is issuing upcoming digital green cards using the verifiable credentials format.
Yep. And that's because the population of the United States, the citizens of the United States, are completely comfortable with getting really strong biometrics on anyone coming across our border, particularly with the idea of living here. And so that is something where, that avoids a lot of the political unsettled feelings that Americans have about that. So it's a good place to start. It allows you to debug all of the technical parts of having that, of issuing a thing. It'd be interesting to know, is that all following the NIST standards and so on that basically look a lot like the mobile ID and what's on your cell phone?
It's following the verifiable credentials standard that the W3C has recently approved and is worked on all in public. The SVIP program, Silicon Valley Innovation Program, has actually been forcing companies, startups to work together to develop the missing pieces to standardize them as well. So.
Yeah, there's also an issue that we're going to have to deal with in pretty short order, which is the idea of trusted silicon. I would be personally shocked if the Communist Party of China did not force Android phones built in China to have backdoors on them. And if you have a backdoor that allows you to get past the secure enclave and figure out what the private keys are, it's, Katie bar the door. And so that making sure those do not leak into the markets of Western countries is a very big priority, and trying to even understand what the rules should be. on that is what does it mean when, well, I have an iPhone that's 5 generations back, and it turns out that even though there's not a back door in that, maybe there is a, there is a known flaw in the silicon that allows you to get around. So we're going to have device standards too that are going to force people to get new cell phones. And that's part of it. We made huge progress. Traditionally, one of the objections to things like mobile ID is, well, what about poor people who can't afford a cell phone? And we pretty much solved that with some of the historic spending that we did in this last session of Congress, where now if you are an indigent person in the United States, you pretty much have the right to have a heavily subsidized cell phone contract. And that means, and usually it's the device itself is not the problem, that most food pantries, actually, if you talk to them, they have lots of donated cell phones in a little pile that are, they're iPhone 6s or better, that they're perfectly serviceable cell phones. But it's the contract that's the problem. And now that we have a pretty good guarantee that even the person living under the bridge can in fact get a decent quality cell phone contract, then it's mainly a question of, are they capable of operating a cell phone and then the software that is necessary. And that's an essential problem with any digital ID. But that was a big step forward in defusing this. Also lurking on the edges of this politically are the whole business of how do you prove that you're legal to vote? Because this is another obvious potential use. And as long as this is, and a lot of the resistance for that concept of using, real ID cards comes from the Democratic Party, the idea that this will disenfranchise people that are not that connected to the financial system. They don't have bank accounts, they may not have a real ID card. But as long as this is an additional way that guarantees the right to vote, I think both parties are comfortable with it. You show up at your precinct with a mobile ID that shows you are resident in that precinct, and you have the right, at least to a provisional ballot, period, full stop. And so that the fraction of the worry that is worried about people being denied their voting rights, this strengthens it. And in fact, you saw one of my favorite Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or it could have been Boebert, I always get them confused. They were saying, we need a national registry of who's legal to vote. Okay, that is not a traditional libertarian Republican point of view, but that did come out of their mouth, and I took note of it. At some point, logic, actually, even to Marjorie Taylor Greene, things eventually become obvious. So anyway, yes. Oh. Oh, yeah, were you responsible for the piece that had to do with the Chinese hackers?
Yes.
Thank you for that. That has moved the ball politically significantly when people understand that, well, the other thing is the North Korean nuclear program funding itself with identity fraud.
So one of the things that has struck me and my team as we've been trying to do all of this reporting is the degree to which information is so fractured between, administration and law enforcement, states and the federal government, public and private sector. And it's almost like alarming to feel like you're the only one kind of trying to put the whole picture together. And I'm wondering why, if there's such agreement about the scale of the problem, has there been no centralized effort to look at the scale of the fraud or the number of victims?
Yeah, well, there's a strong feeling in the political class that that a national digital or national ID card is like a third rail that you want to be 4 steps away from. Okay, and that I think is a misreading of where the public is at. And the public understands that there are these giant databases that know everything about, and they understand that the government can actually get access to those databases under circumstances that I can't talk about here, but they can, and that's generally understood by people. But what they just are frustrated by is having to spend all afternoon after someone has stolen your identity and you have to replace all your credit cards and spend years on hold, just trying to swap out your credit cards and then deal with everything downstream. And that is And that to most people, the real life threat to their privacy comes more from having someone impersonate them online than from, oh my God, there's this database out there. So I think that the political class is not as far advanced on this as the American public is. And so part of what I'm trying to do is to let people appreciate that point. Because this is going to be tremendously popular with the public. And if you just look laterally at other countries that have made good steps toward this, they did not have the level of identity fraud on COVID benefits that we had. They just said, okay, you're from Estonia, get out your cell phone, prove you are who you say you are, and here is your benefit. You can prove that you own this bank account, wire the money to that bank account, and boom. And so that systems like that will be tremendously popular. I think it's also an opportunity to sort of repair the reputation of the government. If you imagine that you log into your to prove your identity using your mobile ID. Imagine that you say, okay, this is a Statue of Liberty. You're taking advantage of something good the government has done. Or Abraham Lincoln, since I'm from Illinois, I'd be okay with that too. Just a reminder that the government does some good in your life, and one of the things that we could do a much better job is preventing identity fraud, because that's a real life pain to tens of millions of Americans every year.
Thanks, Congressman Foster. I'm just curious, you mentioned the Real ID cards and so on. Several states are starting to issue ISO standard mobile driver's licenses. Just wondering what the level of awareness is in Congress about those state initiatives, and is it actually discussed? Like, I have no idea what you guys
the
discussed.
number of wonks, there are probably 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans that really have thought a lot about this. However, you can explain it to to a wide range of people and have them get it really quickly. The logical necessity is easy. Our partners on the digital ID bill that we almost got across the finish line in the Senate were Loomis and Sinema. Okay, who often are thinking about things besides secure digital ID, but we're big backers. They were carrying the water of this in the Senate, and unfortunately, we lost Representative Katko. But the guy who replaced him actually did a lot of cloud computing startups and stuff, and so he's on my list of recruits for maybe Republicans you can talk sense to on this. And so there's. Well, you got to be an optimist to take my job at all. So, okay, and so now Jeremy is operating a stage hook on me, but I just want to thank you.